In 2014, Image Comics debuted a new ongoing series from writer Jay Ferber, which was based in the science fiction subgenre of the space western.
Ferber had worked on books like Marvel's Generation X and DC's The Titans before establishing himself at Image with the series Noble Causes, which followed a family of superheroes. However, instead of playing up action and fighting supervillains, it played up more soap opera-like elements, tackling subjects like teen pregnancy, divorce, and drug abuse. That in turn would be followed by Dynamo 5, which followed the widow of a recently deceased superhero named Captain Dynamo as she tried to locate 5 of his illegitimate children, each of whom had gained an aspect of his abilities.
Now, while the book we are covering today does technically qualify as a space western, it is set on an alien planet with many various humanoid creatures alongside humans. I would say it definitely hews a little bit closer to the western aspect of that name, as it's more of a desert land. There's a lot of gunplay involved. People kind of talk like cowboys. They travel by train. So there's definitely more of that as well. So think of this as being more Trigun and less Firefly.
We have delved a little bit into the history of Western comic books on this series back in episode 21 of the Random Trade Review, where we covered the series Caliber, which was a retelling of the Arthurian legend set in the 1850s Pacific Northwest of the United States. The Western genre of comics experienced a boom in popularity at the end of World War II, much like Westerns did in TV and film, and there were books based on those popular TV series like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and Maverick, while Marvel countered with the likes of The Two-Gun Kid, Kid Cold Outlaw, and The Rawhide Kid.
I guess in the Old West, anyone under the age of 30 was just automatically dubbed Kid.
DC, on the other hand, would actually offer a more unique look at Westerns with characters like Batlash and Jonah Hex, who were more anti-hero than they were heroes. There are also other books that have endured through the ages, despite the fact that Westerns really don't carry the pop culture cachet they once did.
With that in mind, let's start following the adventures of Sheriff Clara Bronson as she struggles to settle the Old West of an alien planet and be a single mother to her son Zeke. And yes, in this case, everyone knows she's a woman. This is not a Bella Little Joe situation.
Little Joe, you are the unfriendliest fella I ever met.
This is Volume 1 of Copperhead.
Clara Bronson and her son Zeke take the train to Copperhead, and while the boy snoozes, one of the passengers sees an appropriate time to begin hitting on the woman. Not too long after that starts, there's a knight in shining armor trying to break things up and probably move in on his own terms. That being said, when the train comes to a stop, the 2 failed Lotharios are ejected from their car by their quandary. Clara is soon greeted by her deputy, who she actually beat up for the job as sheriff, Boo Drukfincius, who immediately is nicknamed Boo by Zeke, despite his objections. As the trio reaches the sheriff's office, Clara finds her protective armor, which, thanks to budget cuts, is actually the protective armor of her predecessor, complete with bullet hole.
Boo is one of the indigenous creatures the area that Copperhead was settled in that were driven off their homeland by the military, which utilized artificially created super soldiers, derogatorily referred to as arties. Which I guess means technically this comic contains AI. Sorry.
Clara is soon called into action as there is a report of a domestic disturbance on the Sewell family farmstead. Boo tries to explain that this is a common occurrence, but Clara takes it seriously enough to investigate. The Sewells, who are a race of individuals known as Sardokans, try to downplay any such violence having occurred, with Mother Sewell in particular selling out to the defense of her husband, who's been accused of this. However, when Clara refuses to tack off, Mama Sewell winds up attacking her and is subsequently arrested.
I thought this was America!
There's little time for comfort as everyone returns to the sheriff's office to find Ben Hickory, the local mining baron, has stopped by for an introduction. He has an army of artificial bodyguards, which puts Clara on edge.
Naturally, after ending the war against Boo's people, the Arties rebelled against their human controllers. I'm sure that comes as a real shock.
Hickory is there to set up a proper bribery schedule, but Clara says that won't be necessary as long as the mining is run legally. From there, the Bronsons elect to head to their new home, only for Clara to be called back to the Sewell residence, this time for a murder. She tells Zeke to stay put and not wander off as nightfall approaches. Clara's orders are followed for at least 20 minutes until Zeke spots a young girl named Annie Oakbridge who's looking for her dog Hugo and offers to help. Soon the two are completely lost in the desert as they start hearing a loud scuttling running across the landscape. It's then the two bump into an artificial being known as Ishmael.
Several years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore,
Ishmael tries to get the kids to safety as a group of large spider-like creatures sets upon them. Back at the Sewell farmstead, Clara and Boo find what appears to be the whole family slaughtered. Thinking it was Papa Sewell, as he had been responsible for the events earlier, they soon find that theory is dismissed as they come upon his dismembered corpse. It's then that one of the supposedly dead bodies reaches up and grabs Clara's leg. Knowing she needs to get the young victim over to the town physician, Doc Mosby, Clara leaves Boo behind as she makes his way to the town and locates the doctor in the old saloon.
What you ought to do, instead of sleeping half the day and carousing around most of the night like you do, why...
Realizing it's going to be a while before she even attempts to question this witness, Clara heads back to the sheriff's office, where Boo radios her with the information that his scanning turned up that there is actually a missing item, a sacred relic to the Sardokans called the Sauvage. Clara immediately begins questioning Mama Sewell, who doesn't take the news of her family's death very well and refuses to talk. Making things worse is that the Oakridge family soon stop by looking for Annie, and Clara realizes that Zeke didn't follow orders and begins to freak out. She rushes back to her new home, only to find Ishmael waiting there with the kids. As Zeke heads back to his mother, he notices something in Ishmael's satchel.
and yes, that would be the Sauvage.
Still lacking trust in the Ardys, Clara draws her gun on Ishmael, but he assures her that his motives are true. However, when Clara requests a scan of his psyche in order to see if he's telling the truth, Ishmael reveals that it's not going to be a clear test due to battle damage on his eye, meaning she'll just have to take his word for it as he leaves. From there, it's on to a tongue-lashing for Zeke before a tearful embrace. Clara and Zeke spend the night at the sheriff's office until the next morning, where Boo arrives with the final data collection from the farmstead. Outside of the missing Sauvage, there really isn't much to go on, meaning that they're going to have to try talking with Mrs. Sewell again. Though maybe this time it's time for the good cop routine, as Mrs. Sewell is brought to her son, Cletus.
Of course he's named Cletus.
Mrs. Sewell is still unable to venture any type of guess as to who exactly would attack her family. However, it does seem to ring a bell when Clara mentions the stolen Sauvage. That being said, Mama Sewell likes to play things close to her vest and not reveal anything as she's released. However, Clara just manages to trail her. Mama Sewell heads over to the local mining facility and barges in, where she corners someone she claims to the Sauvage in order to sell it on the black market. Clara is forced to talk Mrs. Sewell down before the guy gets strangled to death. Back at the office, Boo is going through the data collection scans again, where Zeke recognizes the Sauvage as being in Ishmael's satchel. At the moment, Ishmael is actually delivering it to another member of the Sardokan race.
The dramatic gopher needed a vacation.
Back at the mine, Clara is talking with a none too pleased Mr. Hickory, as he's only allowed to physically attack his employees. She points out that there's an investigation that needs to be completed, and she expects full cooperation from everyone before leaving with Mrs. Sewell. Later, an irate Hickory places a call to the Central Police Headquarters in an attempt to dig up some dirt on Clara. He winds up meeting a lieutenant who just happens to be her ex-partner, and he explains that the last few fat cat tycoons that crossed Clara Bronson's path all had a tendency to wind up dead, so it might be best to just leave her alone, and ends the call. Back at the office, Boo explains to Clara what Zeke said about Ishmael possessing the Sauvage. Boo explains that Ishmael has been a recluse since the war ended, and he just lives off the Badlands where, at least up until last night, he seemed to have a truce with the natives, the spider-like creatures from earlier. Despite Zeke's pleas, it's enough for Clara to head out and try to bring Ishmael in. Added to all that, someone breaks into Doc's office attempting to finish off Cletus. Boo attempts to pursue the fleeing individual, but fails short when trying to leap onto a rooftop. Meanwhile, Clara catches up to Ishmael, and the two square off just as Boo radios in that Cletus is awake. She calls off the fight to go question the survivor, who says a group of natives attacked his family and no one else. Ishmael reveals that he was hired by Sardokan to grab the Sauvage, and that individual just happened to be Floyd Sewell, the oldest child of the family.
Floyd was the black sheep of the Sewell family, eventually getting kicked out after racking up massive gambling debts. Pretty easy to connect the dots from there.
Ishmael begins hearing the natives approaching just as Clara manages to spot Hugo, Annie Oakbridge's missing dog. He provides cover as they get the woofer back home. The next morning, Clara questions Mama Sewell again about Floyd. Even with the estrangement, she won't turn on the little family she has left. That being said, Boo has an idea and heads over to the local saloon to talk to the bartender, who's also known for working on the black market.
I videotape everyone who comes in here so I can blackmail them later.
The barkeep gives up Floyd's whereabouts, and Boo tracks him down in order to convince the elder Sewell child to turn himself in. It turns out he racked up another huge gambling debt, this time to the natives, and used the Savage to try to pay it off. That being said, Floyd can't be arrested as native territory, as well as the Sewell farmstead, are exempt as the territory don't fall within the city limits.
Well, then why did they respond to the domestic disturbance call from the beginning of the story?
That being said, Mama Sewell explains that her covering of Floyd when she heard the Savage was stolen was her last act of compassion, and Floyd will never receive anything more from the Sewell family. They are Dunyan rings. Exiled from the family, Floyd Sewell exits Doc's office. Later, Clara offers Mrs. Sewell a job as Zeke's babysitter, as she respects Mama Sewell's loyalty and tenaciousness. Mama Sewell accepts, and we then move on to a prison planet where one of the inmates looks at a picture of Clara in an official uniform.
And that concludes our look at Volume 1 of Copperhead. How was it? Well, I do really like the artwork in the story. I think this utilizes the Western motif really well in both the storytelling and the artwork. You get the nice, barren, desolate feeling of a Western, and you get a lot of the nice little tropes of that too, like the kid not listening, the tycoon in town who seems to actually run the place, not the mayor, and all of those little bits and pieces. If I do have a problem with it, I think it's a little too fastly paced. This is 5 issues. I kind of wish this maybe been more like 6 or 7. I want to know more about these characters, delve more into their backstory. It just seems like we're just telling the story and getting right to it and not really taking our time to really learn much. I get there's some aspects that need to be mystery for later, but like I said, I do wish this had maybe picked up just a little bit. It seemed to be moving a little too fast. I wish they had maybe stopped and just looked at a few things here and there. Still, though, this is a very enjoyable read. If you're looking for something outside of the world of superhero comics, this will do you fine. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but like I said, it's quite enjoyable. I am going to give Volume 1 of Copperhead a B. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.